All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Magduit, and today we're in FL Studio again. We're going to be doing some FL Studio content for now. I've noticed there's some pretty cool updates that have been coming out for FL, and I also wanted to just go into some of the tools that FL Studio has that are essentially just better than any other DAWs, at least in my opinion. And yeah, today we're going to be looking at mudpies, how to make mudpies, how to do it in a way that's kind of easy, or at least I think is easy, and how to kind of set yourself up for being able to use them in the future in a way that's like, intentional and meaningful, but, also making it so that the process for making it in a way that allows for that isn't so convoluted and difficult. In most DAWs, when you're creating a mudpie, you essentially will have to resample or, record out audio, and then you usually have to go back and take that audio, chop up all the little parts that are bad and remove them, and or remove the most important thing, which is silence from those clips, which can be a pain in the butt and actually ends up, in my opinion, making it almost uninspiring to make mudpies. And obviously that sucks. I mean, who doesn't people want to make mudpies but feel inspired, right? So the way I have found to kind of navigate this level of disinterest or pain and suffering is by using FL Studio's Edison. So Edison is probably the best sampler out there. I really don't think there is a better VST sampler out there in the world, just because of how easy it is to use and how many wonderful, cool tools it has. I use it pretty much for everything. Yeah, in this video, we're going to be going over how I use Edison and some of the things you can do when you're making specifically bass mudpies that can sort of help you with things like leveling and making sure that the sound is, like I said, ready to be used in a project. So without further ado, let's jump into this. Okay, so I have a synthesizer here. I'm using Ghost, and I'm not really going to go into a lot of the sound design techniques this video, but I am just going to let you guys know I'm using Ghost. This is essentially like the love child of FM8 and Serum, and it's essentially just a synthesizer. And whenever you're making mudpies, it really helps to have some kind of a synthesizer or something that you can play with. I find that this human playing of the instrument is what makes the mudpies so interesting and fun. But basically, long story short, we got a synthesizer here, and I'm doing a little bit of post-processing on it. Obviously, we've got some distortion and multiband compression. I'm using Venom, which is another distortion. It's just like an obscure distortion that I like. We've got EQ, just doing some shaping there, and then we're using the new emphasis tool, and we'll get into why I'm using this in a second here. But this is kind of the big thing we're going to be talking about, because this doesn't really relate to sound design. But anyway, this is what the sound sounds like. You're right, and we've got, a flim little squonker doing its thing. So that way we can kind of move it around, and that's what we're going to be kind of moving while we record this mudpie. But yeah, after you've kind of got a sound that you're ready to record into a mudpie, so, I've got my synth, I've got my post-processing here. The most important thing after you've got this sound is to kind of control it in a way where you're going to be able to post-process it further in the context of a song, like an arrangement or a mix or something like that. So most of the time I'd use a clipper here, like K-Clip or Newfangled Saturate or something like that. But I wanted to try out Emphasis because it is actually a really nice tool. And this way we can kind of keep it stock as far as the tools that we're using to create the mudpie, right? So the first step, as I was just saying, is to control the audio. So I'm just using Emphasis here. I have my ceiling set to -4. That way I've got 4 decibels of extra kind of headroom, so that when I drag this into a project, I can distort it a little bit further, I can OTT it a little bit more, or compress it a little bit more, things like that. I'm basically giving myself more room, so that way I can go a little bit further in either direction, right? I can make it quieter or louder. From a digital perspective, right? So that's the first thing that I always do with my mudpies is I essentially control the audio in a way where I allow myself to kind of future-proof it from a post-processing perspective. So that's all I did. I just set the emphasis ceiling to -4, and then I just boosted this input gain kind of to taste until I got it to a place where it sounded pretty good. Something that's worth mentioning is level matching is sometimes really good to turn on while you're boosting the emphasis. And then once you're done with the boosting from a timbral perspective, you just turn this back off, and then it's going to end up being the, full volume. Another thing that you may want to turn on, I didn't hear, but I probably should have, is True Peak. This is going to basically change the detection to True Peak detection, which is kind of nice. That way you're really going to guarantee that there's no, clipping over 0 or anything like that. And it really doesn't change. It doesn't change the way it sounds too much, but from a, digital clip perspective, it's really good because we're essentially guaranteeing that, nothing is going above this set ceiling that we have decided, which is -4 in this case. So yeah, that's the first step. So we want to make sure that our sound, whatever it is that we're going to be creating or recording, is controlled from a volume perspective. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to load up our Edison here. Now, Edison is essentially the best for what we're about to do. Edison is, in my opinion, my favorite tool, just because at the end of the day, it's incredibly good at recording audio. It's incredibly good at recording audio, and it's also incredibly good at manipulating the audio, and just everything about it is just amazing. This is probably the best sampler out there. I mean, when it comes to recording samples into a tool, this definitely makes it easy. So the first thing we're going to do here is, as you can see by default, usually it's set to 5 minutes here for the duration of time that it will record for. Well, we are just going to set this to forever. We don't want to have to worry about the audio clip, stopping in the middle of us playing or something like that. So, I usually set this to forever, and then I'll usually just, obviously turn off the recording once we're done recording in whatever it is that we want to record. So that's the first step. And yeah, that's an important one. So, you don't want to just stop recording in the middle of playing something. It would be unfortunate. The next thing that I usually do is I go over to this on input section. I think it's on that by default. And we actually want to switch this from on input to just input. And what this does, it's really cool. This is, I have not seen this in any other sampler. And this is, I think, my favorite part about Edison. When you set this to input mode, instead of recording, so on input, it basically just starts the recording once it hears audio, and then it just keeps recording. But when it's set to input, it not only will start the recording when it hears audio, but then it will stop when it doesn't hear audio. And it's so good because basically what it keeps doing is it keeps pausing the recording process every time you're not playing something into the Edison. And this is amazing. Like most of the time when you're doing mudpies, you essentially have to go back in and cut out all this empty space, or else your files are just going to be massive, which is also okay. But even then, if you're, still recording this empty space, you're going to have to sift through it later, and it's just basically useless information, right? Like, if you're using a mudpie in a context of a song, a lot of the times this empty space is just unnecessary. So this is an easy and great way to just consolidate the mudpie into a much shorter file, and not have to just, do all of this extra busy work of removing empty space. So this is for sure one of my favorite parts about Edison. But yeah, anyway, and that's kind of the big 2 steps. Now, obviously there's some other things that we can do after we record the audio, but for now, that's essentially it for the setup process. So I just like to make sure that I've got these 2 things set in this way. And then when I go over to my, I'm going to just set up my squonker over here. And when I go to record this audio, you're going to see if I play a note, it'll record and then it'll stop, right? So it'll stop as soon as it doesn't detect anything. And then if I play more stuff, let's just see. Right? If I play more stuff, it's going to record more, and it's going to stop when I'm done recording. So it's just so good. So that way you can kind of explore, maybe, mess around with some knobs in between each kind of play, and that way you can get slight timbral changes, but it's not, recording all that empty space while you're messing with these knobs. And it's it's just so fun. So this is like my favorite way to record mudpies. Like there is no better way. Now I've tried things like rolling sampler. It's just not as intuitive. It doesn't just do what you want it to do. So, yeah, I definitely think that Edison has a huge upper hand when it comes to recording mudpies. But anyway, let's go ahead and just record a few more of these little, wiggly wobbly bass sounds, and then we will do a little bit of post-processing and manipulation of the actual file itself inside of Edison. So I will see you guys in just a second here. Okay, so we're back. All I did was I hit this little record button once I was done recording. So I finished. I clicked this button here. And now let's close out of this. Now we have our audio sample. Now what's cool is we could just export this as is, and I'm going to show you the really fast way to do that in a second here. But there is a little bit of cleaning that we can do inside of Edison to make this a lot nicer. Now, as you can see here, just because of how crazy distorted this synth is, I have a little bit of these little clicks and pops in here, and I'm going to just go in and I'm going to remove these. And luckily, Edison makes it pretty easy. All you really have to do is go over and just click and drag these. You can actually double click too to reset it. But the idea here is we just want to click and drag this box, this red box here, into the kind of space that we want to remove. So what I usually do is I'll double click to kind of start a new line, and then I'll just drag it. And you don't want to cut off too much of the tails, especially if you have a little bit of reverb like I do on this sound. So I'm just going to make sure to leave some stuff in between here, but we can just delete those out, right? And we can just go in here, and by the way, I'm just using middle mouse button to do this. In case you guys didn't know, in FL Studio, you can click down middle mouse button and use it to very aggressively and almost motion sickly move around. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I'm just moving around like that. And basically, yeah, you can just double click and then drag to just keep creating these sort of blocks that we want to remove. And this is just a nice way to be able to clean up these sounds in a really quick way, right? Like this just does not take very long at all. And we can just go in here and make sure that this is a nice clean sample, right? There we go. And that's it. So, how easy was that to clean up the, you know what I mean? Like, again, in other DAWs, I feel like there's just not this level of precision and ease inside of the sampler. And I'm just a huge fan of that. So now that we have our file cleaned up, the fun part is rendering it. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. You can click save, and then there's a little save sample as option up here. You can also save sample as 24-bit WAV file. Both of those work. But my personal favorite way to go about doing this is I will grab my sample library folder. So let me just go ahead and go to my sample library here. And I'll just let me just go to my mudpies folder here. I do have a mudpies folder. Actually, I have a second folder inside the folder. Anyway, and what I like to do here is I will actually just click and drag. So I'll have this like on the screen if possible here. Let me just... I want it to be like, I want you to see where I'm dragging it. Okay, perfect. What I will do is there's this button over here that says drag copy sample selection. And you have two options. You can actually just select a certain part of the sample and it'll only render that, which is just insane. But we actually just want to do the whole thing. So we're just gonna make sure to Control A. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna just drag this onto the folder over here. Now I'm sorry that I know you couldn't see it there, but I was just dragging it like right onto this little box here. And now we've got this sound designing with Edison, which is it's awesome that it saves the project title into the name of the sample. And then it has the date that it was created as well. So we can obviously rename this. Now I have a very specific dating, methodology. So I always do just number dash, I have that kind of thing going. But the big thing that I like to do is I like to label it with what instrument it is. So, what synth I was using, what DAW I was in while recording it, because I use multiple DAWs. And then, what note I'm playing, or multiple notes if I am using multiple notes. Now, in this context, I was just playing an F note. And that's another thing to keep in mind. You may want to stick to one note most of the time with mudpies. Obviously, you can do multiple notes, which I have even done. But just know that that's going to make it a little bit more difficult to use in the context of a song. Just because, if it's not one note, then you have to worry about which note is being played at what time, versus if the whole mudpie is one note, it's an F note, for example. In this context, we just made F notes. So that means I can then go in and go, okay, it's an F note. Well, I want it to be a D sharp, so I'm going to pitch it down 2 semitones, right? You can do that kind of stuff, where, now exactly what it is, so you can actually change it to the note that you want it to be, which is handy. So we're just going to rename this. We're going to put in here, let's do F mudpie ghost FL 2025, and then we'll just do we'll leave that for now. We'll leave it the way it is here with the September 2, and then boom, and that's how I will record mudpies. And that process is so much easier than like every other process I've ever experienced with mudpies. It's just so easy to consolidate and arrange and fix the mudpie inside of Edison, especially when it comes to the recording process too. So I think that's pretty much everything when it comes to recording mudpies. That's pretty much the process. And then obviously you can then drag that into a song and use it however you want. So I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that it showed you guys how I go about recording mudpies and why I think FL Studio's Edison is for sure the GOAT when it comes to recording these mudpies. And I definitely hope that this inspires you guys to get into this habit of sound design, breaking outside of the, preset and or synthesizer arrangement process as well, and diving deeper into sample-based processing or sample-based arrangement, I should say. Stay tuned for more FL Studio fun stuff. I'm going to keep going down this rabbit hole. There's all kinds of weird things we can do inside of FL Studio. But this is actually a not so weird thing. It's just a very, very handy thing. But anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.